Welcome in. Good morning. It's another episode of Legal Access brought to you by the McGuire Law Firm. Today's topic is DUI law. If you have any questions about DUI, whether you've been involved in one or just have a question about the process and as a whole, please feel free to give us a call. The phone number is on your screen, 843-848-8080. Here to answer the call, your questions today on my panel. To my left is Billy Moncton. Welcome in, Billy.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
And also to your left, we have Rick O'Neill. Rick, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, good afternoon. Nice to see you guys again.
Now, we're well covered here to be able to answer all questions from all angles on this because, Billy, you've worked in the past as a prosecutor, so in addition to now doing defense work.
That's correct.
Where's your firm, or what is your firm, who is your firm, and what else do you work on besides criminal defense?
My firm is Moncton, Hembry, and Humphreys. I'm law partners Fran Humphreys, Senator Greg Hembry. We primarily do criminal defense and personal injury work.
And of course, Greg Hembry is a former solicitor, so he's well-versed as far as prosecution is concerned.
Greg was the former solicitor, and Fran served as his deputy solicitor.
Yeah. And also to your left, also to look at things from all angles, Rick O'Neill used to have experience in being in law enforcement. So from that angle and where you are right now as far as criminal defense, what else do you work with as far, in addition to criminal defense, Rick?
We do workers' compensation and auto accidents, premises liability.
So again, no matter what your questions are as far as the topic of DUI law, make sure and give us a call here today. We'll get you on the air and get those questions answered as quickly as possible. I don't do a whole lot of research usually before these shows, but I did a little bit here today. I was looking as far as DUI deaths in the state of South Carolina, and according to some metrics, South Carolina leads the nation in drunk driving deaths, according to a 2024 report. And in addition to that, also, we've got nearly a third of all traffic fatalities in the state of South Carolina are attributed to drunk driving. Now, there is some new laws that are being talked about in the state of South Carolina. It's already passed the Senate. It's on its way to the House right now that would to get rid of some of the loopholes and strengthen our DUI laws. Do you think the laws in the state of South Carolina need to be strengthened?
Well, you know, you call it a loophole, but one of the things that we did, and I know Rick can testify to this, being a former law enforcement, that one of the main requirements that got instituted in the DUI law years ago was mandatory video and audio recording of the scene. Because what would happen is you'd get a police report prior to that, and they all sounded the same, the exact same. So the state enacted mandatory video requirements, so that if you're on a jury, you get to go to the scene, the exact scene. You don't get to listen to what the officer says or what the person charged says. You get to see the video yourself. As part of that mandatory video requirement, there were some provisions in the law that our Supreme Court and Court of Appeals ruled on, that if you don't have that videotape, then it can be grounds for the case to be dismissed completely. Now, what the law is trying to do now, that's passed the Senate, it has to go to the House, is they're trying to, I'm going to say, weaken that requirement. But as a former prosecutor, if I don't have the videotape, I know that Rick, good lawyer, is going to ask, where's the video? Because everybody knows that there's a videotape.
Right.
Why it's not being used in the case, it's going to create a problem. So I don't know if it's a weakening, it's a less requirement, but from a prosecutor standpoint, if you don't have that video, it's a tough case to prove.
You know, over the years, because there's been a couple major revisions to the DUI laws in this state over the past 2 decades. I mean, as each year goes by, I see less and less cases that have these so-called technicalities. So, I mean, I don't see it as a problem. I think the law is fine as it is. The jury wants to see what happened on the roadside. They want to see the bad driving on a videotape. They want to see what happened during the breath test. And I think, you know, when you're accused of a crime, there's a lot of ramifications in a DUI conviction. I think you're entitled to have that due process rights to have all the evidence shown to the fact finder.
And to expand on what Rick just said, a DUI conviction, you know, it's a enhanced offense. So if you get a DUI conviction in South Carolina looks 10 years back. So if you get arrested again, it's a DUI second. DUI second carries up to a year. But one of the repercussions and why due process is so important in DUI law is people think you just pay a fine, but you don't just pay a fine. You're going to have to do ADSAP. but the most severe penalty, in my opinion, is the SR22 insurance. If you get convicted in South Carolina of a DUI, you got to carry an SR22 insurance certificate for 3 years, and
Right.
it is extremely expensive. Unfortunately, it has the ability to put people out of being able to drive because they can't afford it. It's that expensive.
And also explain what is ADSAP.
ADSAP's I'm sorry, I gave the acronym. It's an alcohol drug safety program.
Okay.
That you have to go through, and that's an additional fee you have to pay. And in order to get your driver's license back, you have to complete the ADSAP course, and you have to carry the SR22 insurance certificate.
You know, I think where the focus should be on is for people that are driving under suspension. They're the ones that never go to ADSAP and they just continue to drive. And I think the resources would be much better suited if the focus was on prosecuting those people in that category. And you know, the DUI law as is fine in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, but Rick's right. The DUSs are people operating uninsured vehicles. That is a tremendous problem we're seeing, where people, you know, get a conviction and then they don't do the right things. There's no way to go punish them if they don't do the right things unless they get called again for DUS.
Now, I skipped ahead of myself a little bit with the Senate bill that's out there and just passed unanimously, by the way, and your partner was one of the senators who voted for it unanimously, Greg Hembry. I usually, the very first question I asked her in the DUI show is like, okay, if you're talking to somebody out on the street or somebody just happens to meet you in the line at a restaurant or a grocery store and say, hey, if I get pulled over for DUI, should I blow or not blow as far as the breathalyzer is concerned?
I tell everybody, it kind of depends on your circumstance, and Rick may have a different opinion on this. If you had anything to drink, go ahead and blow, okay? Because if you don't blow, it's a 6-month suspension of your driving privileges.
Right.
If you have been drinking probably more than 2 drinks, you probably shouldn't blow. The reason for that, if you blow 0.08 to 0.10, you're looking at up to 30 days in jail. 0.11 to 0.14, 60 days in jail. 0.15 or higher, you're looking at 90 days in jail, plus the interlock device. So by blowing, you're actually hurting yourself from an evidence standpoint.
Right.
So if you've been drinking, the best thing to do is take an Uber, but if you don't, I wouldn't recommend blowing the breathalyzer.
Right. I think it's a case-by-case basis. For instance, the other night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from someone that was following another person, and they said the person had 4 drinks over 4 hours. You know, they said, you know, we were following the recommended don't have more than 1 drink an hour. And, you know, if we can get to them, do we tell them take the breath test or not? And I said, well, that sounds fine. Come to find out, the officer screened that driver that was pulled over and let him go with a warning.
Right.
So if that person would have refused the breath test, they probably would have blown easily below the limit and would have still been arrested, and then it would, you know, the focus sort of, why didn't you take the breath test? So, I mean, I think it's an individual basis. And a lot of people really haven't got the word that with the latest revision of the DUI laws, if you don't take the breath test, you're still, and you're, it's found that there was no reason, and it was a successful suspension, you're gonna have to get that IID, the Ignition Interlock Device anyway. So that now they have 2 different opportunities to get that placed on your car.
Right.
And a lot of people are under the assumption it was, you know, under the old law, a lot of people said, well, you know, really what do I have to lose? But you have a lot to lose if you don't take the breath test.
Tell you what, guys, we're going to run to a break here real quick. We do have some people on the line, and if you're on the line right now, hold on, because we're going to go away for about 90 seconds. Be right back. We'll get you on the air and answer your questions here today. DUI law, that's our topic here on Legal Access, brought to you by the McGuire Law Firm. Welcome back. It's Legal Access, brought to you by the McGuire Law Firm. Today, DUI law is our topic, along with Billy Monkton and Rick O'Neill. We are very well equipped to answer any question that you might have as far as DUI is concerned, whether it's something specific or in general. And Jimmy from Darlington has been holding very patiently through our break. So Jimmy, thanks for hanging on. What's your question for the panel today?
Well, it used to be, I don't know if it still is, like if you got to get SR22 because of DUI or whatever it might cause you to get SR22. You could wait 3 years, and then you wouldn't have to get SR22. Do you still have to get SR? Say if I wait 4 years and then I'll get insurance, I still got to get SR22?
Yeah, the waiting it out on doing the ADSAP or getting the SR22, that loophole was eliminated long ago. So to get driving again, you're going to have to complete those 2 steps. You know, the good thing about the ignition interlock devices, though, is in most cases, if you're willing to put that ignition interlock on your car, they'll let you drive in the interim while you're trying to get some of these requirements, while you're going to the ADSAP and so on. But that's at your own expense, but that's one way to get driving quicker. And you know, I heard something on the radio that they're having the annual amnesty program from the DMV, that certain suspensions, you know, they may give you a break and help you get driving sooner. So you should check into that as well. Anyone out there with a pending suspension on their license, go to the DMV website and get the details on that. I think it's still available.
I think it's still in play.
And Jimmy, make sure and drive carefully this weekend around Darlington. You're going to have a lot of people in town for the race. Also, I mean, we were talking about breathalyzers a minute ago. In South Carolina, at least, is it statewide that they don't do a roadside breathalyzer test? You have to go back to the station to have it done. Why isn't South Carolina like a lot of other states where they just have the breathalyzer with the police officer?
That's called a PBT, a preliminary breath test. Most states do have it. I think it goes back to a court ruling here in South Carolina years ago that the police were allowed 1 breath test, and the PBTs, it was ruled that that was the 1 breath test, and they're not admissible in court because they're really not as technically sophisticated as the other breath tests at the police station. So currently in South Carolina, that's not an option.
Now, Rick, earlier, before we took a break, you said that somebody that you were talking with at 3 in the morning that was let off with just a warning. I had talked to some defense attorneys in the past that basically said that if you get pulled over for suspicion of DUI, pretty much almost assuredly you're going to be going to jail.
No, I don't think that's the case. It's a case-by-case basis. I think, you know, there's one strategy on a DUI enforcement officer is to stop as many vehicles as possible, you know, tag lights out, speeding 10 miles over an hour, you know, in those wee hours of the morning. And they're looking for a strong case that can be prosecuted with no problems. And so they may stop 5 people in an hour, and there's only one that really they take to the next level with the field sobriety tests and so on.
Now, as far as field sobriety tests are concerned, we talked about breathalyzer, but there are 3 other field sobriety tests that can be administered here in the state of South Carolina. How, can you refuse those if you get pulled over, and if you do, are there any ramifications like a breathalyzer?
You can refuse the field sobriety test. It's no ramifications on your license. Basically, the 3 field sobriety tests we see all the time is what we call the horizontal nystagmus test. They hold a pen or a light in front of you, go back and forth, and they're looking for involuntary movements of the eyes. Unless Rick's seen one, you really can't see that as a defense lawyer or a juror.
Right.
And then they have what we call the walk and turn test, which is heel to toe, 9 steps one way, 9 steps back. And then the stand on one leg test, stare at your foot and count to 30 seconds or whatever, but they never give you a time on how long you're supposed to count. You know, but the officer on those is supposed to ask you if you have any medical issues that could render you unavailable. I tell people if you have the option to refuse them, they're evidence gathering apparatus. You know, if you can do them in your home stone cold without doing anything, or if you're clumsy, you're gonna mess up with them. If any kind of issue with them, the officer is gonna look at them as if you are intoxicated. So I don't advise, if you've been drinking, don't do them.
And, you know, our population is graying, especially with all the retirees coming to South Carolina. I have a big problem with the relevancy of a field sobriety test on someone in their 60s and 70s, and you know, even in their 50s. Another issue is if you're overweight, it's hard to do those as well. It's a big hindrance on your balance and so forth. You know, The HGN test with the eye, that may be something that they could do on all drivers, but the other two, I think especially with our older population, needs to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Now, as far as being pulled over for being intoxicated by alcohol, that's one thing that can be measured, but in the state of South Carolina, no recreational drugs are legal, but if you are under the influence of either prescription drugs or recreational drugs, you can still be pulled over and arrested for DUI, but how is that proven?
What'll happen a lot of times is they take you to the breathalyzer and you blow 0, 0. I see it more and more all the time, especially with these THC drinks and gummies, and people are doing them. It'll be 0, 0, and then they offer you a urine or blood test. They have to take you to the hospital because our local police departments are not equipped to draw blood. And if you refuse that test, then basically what's going to happen is same thing as refusing the breath test. Your license is going to be suspended. But we are seeing more and more of the blood and urine test because people blowing 0.0 on the breathalyzer. But when you watch the video, you can tell something's definitely not right.
Yeah, one of the ways that prosecutors are trying to get around those type of issues is going for search warrants to get. If you refuse, they're going to go get a search warrant regardless to get a blood sample, and that's how they can prove some of these type of non-alcohol DUIs. And I think that's being considered under this new DUI amendment of the law.
The other thing is, if you're charged with felony DUI, great bodily injury or death, then by you driving in South Carolina, you basically consent that they will take you to the hospital and draw your blood. That will happen. If it's a serious accident, you can't refuse that. You can say you're going to refuse it, but they are going to go draw your blood.
They can hold you down, strap you down, and get it.
Sounds like you've seen that.
Yes.
Tell you what, we've got about 10 minutes left in the show. We'd love to hear you on if you have any questions about DUI, whether it's something specific or in general. The phone number's on your screen. Don't waste that last 10 minutes. If you've got a DUI question, get it in. We'll get it answered for you here. Going to take a quick little break and be right back with our final segment here on Legal Access, brought to you by the McGuire Law Firm. Welcome back to Legal Access, brought to you by the McGuire Law Firm. We're talking about DUI law here today. We're expecting somebody from the solicitor's office, but we did just fine along with Billy Monkton and Rick O'Neill. So thanks for watching here today, and thanks for the phone calls too. Still got a little under 10 minutes left. If you've got a last-minute phone call about DUI, anything in specific or general, and we'll get you on the air and get your questions answered for you here today. Now, we usually do a boating show coming up around Memorial Day, but let's go ahead and switch over real quick to BUI, boating under the influence, because it's starting to get warmer already, and a lot of people are going to get out on the waterways and the lakes and stuff like that. How does BUI differ from a DUI?
Well, the most easy thing to focus on is there's not a flat surface to do the second and third field sobriety test on. Even there's going to be some rocking of the boat. So in those type of cases, I think the officers tend to rely more on the HGN with the eyes, or they could, stop at a dock or get off the boat.
Right.
If that's the case. But they look more just for the observations on slurred speech. And if you've been on the water all day, you're probably going to have red bloodshot eyes, right? So it's a little more difficult, but the same thing with the breath test. They're offered a breath test and so on, and that they're privileged to operate a vehicle or a vessel. A vessel can be suspended just as well.
Plus, open containers are generally expected on boats rather than in cars, so I guess that'd be all right too. We were talking about roadside sobriety test. Checkpoints almost seem like it violates the Constitution with illegal search and seizure, but they have been ruled to be constitutional as far as roadside checkpoints are concerned.
They have to be, there's some rules to that. They have to be notified that there's going to be one. So sometimes you'll see on the news, hey, there's going to be a checkpoint here. They are looking for everything. Right. People uninsured. I think that's probably one of the biggest problems we have around here right now is people driving vehicles and they're uninsured or they're suspended. Right. Do they get some DUIs in those? Yes, but a lot of times the rules are pretty clear on a checkpoint. You got some time frames on the way things have to occur. Because normally in a DUI checkpoint, you don't have bad driving. So there's no evidence you're driving the vehicle bad, which is always something
Right.
you see in a DUI case. They want to testify you swerving all over the road, going in the median, hit something or whatnot. But in a checkpoint case, you don't have that. You may just have somebody that's perfectly fine, have not violated any driving laws, but they have alcohol in their system. So it's a little bit harder case.
I think they get more drug cases out of those checkpoints than they do alcohol cases, because, you know, every third car they open the window and
Yeah.
you can smell it. I have a problem with them. I don't think the resources are best suited on checkpoints. I mean, I think it's a deterrent. It's probably the best thing you get out of a checkpoint. I think if all that money that was spent to have 20 officers and just saturate a certain area on Friday and Saturday nights,
Right.
where statistically you're having a lot of DUI accidents, I think the money would be better spent there. I think they'd get a lot more arrests, but that's just my opinion.
As criminal defense attorneys, obviously one of your options is to see if you can get your clients into a diversion program. I know that Horry County or the 15th Circuit has a lot of diversion programs in addition to some of the Youthful Offenders Act or PTI, but they also have what used to be called a DUI court, or it used to be drug court.
They have right now, Horry County is one of the pioneers in this. It's through treatment court. And there are 3 levels of treatment court in Horry County. You have a 90-day program, you have a 9-month program, and you have an 18-month program. In all these programs, you're drug and alcohol tested sometimes twice a week. In the 90-day program, in the 18-month program, you could be drug tested 2-3 times a week. I like the idea of a treatment court. Basically what happens is, in order for you to get into it, you have to plead guilty to the DUI. Then your sentence is treatment court. Where that helps the state and everybody, if you successfully complete treatment court, then your case will be reopened and your charges are dismissed and expunged from your record. If you do not successfully complete it, a positive drug test, not reporting to your counseling sessions, getting rearrested, the conviction automatically goes in. So the state, when they do this, they don't have to go back and reopen the case and try the case. You've pled to get into treatment court. You have an opportunity basically to clean your record up and do everything. And the treatment court, you know, you rarely see people that go through treatment court reoffend, because there's so much they got to do.
Right.
And if they go through all of that, especially the 18-month program, and we see that in a lot of drug cases, you usually do not see them again, because the requirements are so intense that if you can make it through 18 months,
Right.
you're probably not going to mess up again.
Here's my 2 cents on that. I think for first offense only, DUIs, that type of a program, mandatory, would help curb the DUI death rate in this state.
And as we said at the beginning of the show, according to some metrics, we are leads the nation in the number of drunk driving deaths. South Carolina does. So please be careful out on the road. And if you have any other questions, make sure and you can email us. We're about done with the show here today, but our email is always open, legalaccess@WMBFnews.com, and we'll answer you off the air. So we appreciate you calling. If you want to get that in, please feel free to do so. Want to thank Billy Monkton, Rick O'Neill for being here on the panel with us today. Next week when we get together, it's real estate law. That's our topic next week, next Thursday. We'll see you then right here on WMBF News. I'm Dave Priest. See you then.
You may wish to consult a lawyer to obtain case-specific legal advice. Information regarding lawyers can be located online or by contacting the South Carolina Bar Lawyer Referral Service, toll-free at 1-800-868-2284. If you are currently represented by an attorney,